All right, we'll call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock, our regular September 22nd Planning Commission meeting. And prior to beginning, I will read this virtual information statement related to meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the governor has declared a state of emergency to exist in California as a result of the threat of COVID-19. The governor also issued Executive Order N-33-20, which directs Californians to follow public health directives, including canceling large gatherings. The executive order also allows local legislative bodies to hold meetings via conference calls while still meeting state transparency requirements. So in order to participate in a virtual meeting, we're utilizing the Zoom application for this live broadcast. For this meeting, we'll be using the question and answer functionality of the tool in order to accommodate public meeting. On your device, the Q&A section of the app is located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. For those of you that would like to comment during this meeting, please enter your comments into the question and answer portion of the app and be sure to state the item you will be commenting on. During the public comment of each item, staff will read aloud the comments provided by the public for all to hear for that specific item. Please be timely with your questions, as once the public hearing is closed or the item has been discussed by the Planning Commission and voted on, no more comments will be accepted for that item. So may I have roll call, please?
Chairwoman Blake?
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Silman?
Here.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Here.
Commissioner Adams?
Here.
Commissioner Brookman?
Here.
Commissioner Dale?
He's here.
Is he unmuted?
Commissioner Dale?
We see his icon.
Yeah, he's... Commissioner Dosher?
Here.
All right, thank you, Ashley. So please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Adams, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Ben, do we have any agenda modifications that are necessary at this time?
No agenda modifications by staff.
All right. So moving on to the Planning Commission meeting schedule. I think Ben has a few items to discuss and update us on.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, we hopped the written requests. I don't believe we've received any written requests or if there's been anything online. I know we have, and then also we have the appearance of interested citizens where anybody could speak now or later with the items.
All right, thank you for that, for backing me up on the agenda. So seeing that we'd have no public comments online, do we have any public comments in the audience? For an agenda, perhaps you have something to speak to on an agenda item. If not, okay, then we'll wait to hear from you at that time. Thank you so much.
Through the chair, I believe we've had our planning commissioner join us.
Yes, Bovin, can you hear us? It said it's mute. He's muted. And then also our attorney, Nick Papageorge, Papa John, excuse me, is with us. Nick, can you hear us? Great.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, we'll stay tuned with Mr. Dale. Bovin, if you could hear us, shoot me a text, or if we could, I could contact you if we need to. Okay. So going on to item 4, Planning Commission meeting schedule. Is he there? Yeah. Okay, great. What I wanted to bring up is this with the holidays and what we have going on with staff capacity is that typically the regular scheduled meetings are set up for the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. And then when you get into November, and so with staff capacity, we just haven't been able to hit that first meeting. And so I usually just planning on that fourth Wednesday of the month. The fourth Wednesday of the month in November lands the day before Thanksgiving. And so with City Hall being closed, I know my wife's going to have me scheduled for something. I don't plan on being here. And so what I'd like to do is officially cancel the regular meetings on November 10th and 24th, which would be the regularly scheduled meetings, and then set a special meeting for November 15th. And this one's a little bit dynamic because it's a Monday. I think that's where we landed. It was the only place I could find in the calendar that would fit with the schedule for the chambers and not go to a Friday. And so I wanted to bring that to the commission for consideration.
Thank you. Any discussion from the commissioners on those cancellations and adding special meeting? Okay, so with that, we'll look for a motion to approve the meeting schedule.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting schedule.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote?
Commissioner Dosher,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Brookman,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Silman,
Yes.
Chairwoman Blake.
Yes. Thank you. All right, so next we'll move on to agenda item number 5, minutes from the August 25th, 2021 meeting. If there are any interests or modifications to the minutes, otherwise we'll look for a motion.
I'll motion to approve the minutes,
Thank
the
you.
August 25th meeting.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Dosher,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Brookman,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Silman,
Yes.
Chairwoman Blake.
Yes, thank you. So next, we're moving on to our first public hearing item, rescinding the Lincoln East specific plan.
So through the chair, I need to recuse myself. I actually live within 1,000 feet of this application, so I'll need to not hear this.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And I too, Chairman Blake, live within 1,000 feet, so I will go into the back room.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Silman.
And I as well. Live within 1,000 feet, so.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay,
Nice seeing you guys.
We'll try not to keep you too long.
we'll see you for number 7. Thank you. With that,
All right.
we'll ask Ben for a staff report.
All right, so, yes, this is definitely affects, it's a large area, the Lincoln East specific plan. And, but we still maintain a quorum here. And so, so with that, I'll get into the weeds on this a little bit. And so what we have before you is consideration for a recommendation to the city council to consider rescinding the Lincoln East specific plan. And so the Lincoln East specific plan, it has to do with a specific plan that was developed, and I'll get into the timeline, for the southwest corner of the Yuba City in the sphere. So the area is currently in Sutter County. It's in the county jurisdiction, but it's in the city sphere of limits, and it's bounded by Bogue Road on the south, George Washington Boulevard on the west, Sanborn Harding on the east, and then you have Franklin on the north. So rough timeline, April 2004, the city approved its new general plan. March 2005, we established 12 growth policies that were discussed previously that were put in place to put kind of a check on growth. At that time, we were having exponential growth. in order to put some time, to put some checks and balances in place in order to check that growth, to make sure they were paying impact fees that weren't established yet, to make sure they were meeting design guidelines and having time for our zoning ordinances to be updated to match that general plan requirements. They put into place these 12 growth policies with growth growing exponentially. In 2008, and so in that time frame from 2005 to 2008, there was a developer that was really leading the charge on developing the Lincoln East specific plan, because with the general plan, it required new development in certain areas with the growth policies in 2005, that if you're in these areas, you need to have a specific plan prior to developing. So there was controlled growth. And so there's a large developer that came in. They wanted to develop a substantial section of that Lincoln East specific plan area, probably about a third of it. And they were fronting the money and the push for the specific plan. The recession hits, and they decide they're going to pull out. So from 2008 to 2010, the city makes the decision to move forward with that Lincoln East specific plan as a city endeavor, with the idea that, hey, we're going to plan for this growth, so when the economy comes back, we're going to be ready for it, and it's not going to be a hindrance. So we're going to be ready with the economy and to jumpstart development when it comes back. In 2010, it's adopted. 11 years pass, and here we are today. Recently, we removed the growth policies with finding that they were basically out of date. And so there was a lot of stuff in there regarding those checks and balances that were now redundant because we've established the water and sewer master plans. We want options for school CFDs versus payments. There was just a lot of old stuff in there. And one of those was that specific plan requirement, that when we removed the 12 growth policies, there's no longer a requirement for a specific plan. And the idea with that was really that the city believes with the general plan, with their zoning code, and with the stuff that we have in place, that we could look at developments individually as how they come in with a city because of our land type with small parcels, that we could kind of look at these independently and figure out how to make them work and work through it. So what you have before you here is the two land use maps. So in 2004, 2005, when that general plan was adopted, you have this land use on, so that's what came in the general plan. The land use map, once it worked through all of the specifics of the specific plan, where you really get into the details on how you're going to work around different properties, how you're going to make sure that you have enough housing for your different housing types, for your parks, for your for how much residence you want to put in there. This is what currently is approved today. And I want to highlight this. This is what I'm proposing to remain. And so when we remove the plan is a document that gets into the weeds about the mitigations and the requirements with development. It doesn't change the land use. So the general plan is approved with this land use and with the zoning. So that's what's been approved. If somebody comes in to develop today, if they come into this quadrant, it needs to be medium density residential. The original intent of the Lincoln East specific plan, as we go into it, was facilitate controlled growth in the sphere of influence, 1,160 acres of planned development with a mixed residential, commercial, recreation, parks, public facilities, schools, fire stations, et cetera. Updated land uses, pre-annexation zoning. And so before the area could be annexed, we had to establish that pre-annexation zoning. So then it was ready for any time somebody wants to come into the city, they put an application into LAFCO and they could come in and it would line up with what it would come in accordance with that pre-annexation zoning. There was an environmental impact report that was completed, and it established a requirement for a public facilities finance plan that goes into how some of these roads and how some of these parks and how some of these overall Because what would happen is you have a large developer that comes in, he has to front a lot of this development infrastructure. And so they need to have a public facilities financing plan to say, okay, if I come in here and build this, I need to build a portion of this road. That share of that road is spread out as other developments come in and that infrastructure comes in. So since adoption, no lands within the Lincoln East Pacific boundary have been annexed or developed. And so the whole plan was put in place to be ready for when development comes. And then now we're sitting here 12 years later, and there's still nothing going on. We've had a West Sanborn map that's been proposed, but we haven't processed it because really you could process it and say comply with the Lincoln East Pacific plan, but it's really unbuildable based on that plan requirement. And so the reason there hasn't been development is because when you get into the weeds into the plan, there's challenging implementation provisions, development agreements, finance plans, outdated mitigation measures, and infrastructure planning that has resulted really, instead of being ready for growth, it's really been a deterrent for the growth. So what this really changes is that you have this Lincoln East Pacific plan. It's a document that has, the location, the breakdown, and gets into the weeds on the road widths, and pretty detailed specific. By rescinding this plan, what we're basically doing is we're removing the development agreement requirement. So now a project that comes in that's over 10 acres, they don't have to go through the process to get a development agreement. The biological and this is for pros or cons, but this is really what it is that we're removing on the EIR. When that was done at that time, it was popular, Swanson hawk mitigation. And so there was ag land, and so they put in a 2-to-1 Swanson hawk ag mitigation requirement. We don't see that on other developments, and there's actually biological studies that you could look at that say developed orchard land isn't Swanson hawk habitat. And so there's ag mitigation requirements where we just recently have done the Bogue Stewart master plan, and in other areas in the city don't have the ag mitigation requirement because really in Yuba City, everywhere where you're building is ag land. And so we've considered that overriding significant impact in other areas if it's within the sphere and it's controlled growth. But that adds more, so having it on there is another component. It reduces affordable housing requirements. And so right now in the city, we don't have a special fee for affordable housing or some sort of implementation policy. We require by the state that we have to zone enough housing for it, but there's not a requirement as in this plan that says it has to be in conjunction when you build. And so the problem you have with that is that I got a planning document that says when you build, it has to be in conjunction with the development, and there has to be 4% low income, 4% very low income, 2% extremely low, moderate. And so if I have one development that wants to come into the corner here, I don't have a means to figure out, well, how are they going to build the apartment complex up here, because they would have to build the whole road, the infrastructure to get there, and then figure out the financing on the affordable housing component on top of that. And so it puts us into this, and then how does staff can't override that. So then are you doing one-offs to the city council on trying to figure out how to pencil that out and make it work? You have development phasing conflicts. And so originally it was really built to be kind of this inside out where there was a big chunk of land in here and it was going to be built up to the north and out. And so the master plan, and it was done before the current water and sewer master plan. And so we've have in 2018, 2019, the city public works, they updated their water and sewer master plan. And so so what they call for a water line on Sanborn doesn't match with what our real goal is now, or it doesn't match with where the water tank needs to be as of now. So there's some conflicts with that. So no development phasing, no financing plan. And so that's a big thing, because if this allows them to come in individually, if a big project comes in, they could have a financing plan. It'd be like any other project that comes in Yuba City. If it's a large development and they want to spread the cost out across other parcels, they're more than welcome to have a financing plan and coordinate, but it's not a requirement of having this plan across the whole city that then we don't know how it phases and how the money comes out. No specific building design standards. So in the back of this, there's some specific building design standards you regarded to lighting and different attributes, which are all good things for sure. But basically, by removing this plan, it's really, hey, you build per city standards, citywide. And one of the things that is an added complication that's not just all easy is that now that you're removing the plan, right now, if a residential property came in right now, they would be processed without worrying about the environmental because it's already been analyzed under the specific plan EIR, and it was already. And if they build it per the plan, there's no additional environmental review. But with us rescinding the plan, then each project will need to be looked at as a independent project, and most likely will come through this mitigated neg deck process with some mitigations on that. But time has changed, and so there will be some stuff about vehicle miles traveled, and the EIR doesn't go away. It's kind of a base plate. You know, it's in the background that there was a lot of studies and analysis done. And there was a lot of studies and analysis to figure out these road widths, where they're at. None of that information's gone away to staff, but it's not a requirement that it has to be exactly this way. So the proposed rescission will facilitate plan development within the sphere of influence. You know, so really what happens is the plan goes away and it just follows the city standard processes. If a development came in the El Margarita area right now, it would go through the city processes where we analyze it for utilities, pay their impact fees, and we look at it on an independent basis. That's what we're proposing happens with this. The pre-annexation zoning and other items considered approved in associated with original approval that are not proposed to be rescinded. So again, that land use map is going to be the same. And the parks are still laid out there. And so if somebody did want to change that, it would be it would be the same as if the plan was in place. They would have to come to us, ask us for a general plan amendment and a rezone if they want to change it, which is a complicated process that has discretionary review where they would have to justify the need, show the impacts, and then work through those steps to change it. So the plan removal is not proposing to change any of that. So what stays the same? The land use, the densities, the zoning, city standards, the roadway circulation, the parks, the general plan requirements, utility requirements, impact fees, project review processes. So if a subdivision map comes forward, it's still going to come before the planning commission and they're going to look at it. You're going to look at it, but it's for consistency with the general plan and city policies versus consistency with the specific plan in there. Planning documents remain available for use. So there still are those traffic studies. There still are those triggers and thresholds for when Cherry is supposed to get a signal or when, there's a cul-de-sac, I believe came up at the last meeting on Sanborn. There's some triggers on there when the road improvements are going to happen. And that's where staff has to look at those studies still and implement those depending on what individual development comes in. Regarding the environmental on this action, let's go. In November 2009, the Environmental Impact Report, EIR for Lincoln East, was approved by City Council. Staff has performed a preliminary environmental assessment to determine the decision. So this basically gets into the environmental of this action. So of removing this plan, what we're saying is this isn't a project. Under California CEQA, we're saying that with the rescission of this and with no, there's been no development under this Lincoln East specific plan, that it's not a project. And there's in the wording under that, which came directly from our attorney, is these circumstances, the mere rescission of the ordinance and associated Lincoln East specific plan is merely a transactional matter. The current practice and regulations regarding plan development are maintained, and as the rescission will not result in either a direct or indirect physical change in the environmental baseline. So that's for the environmental process associated with the rescission. And so with that, I'm requesting that you conduct a public hearing and then adopt a resolution recommending City Council of the City of Yuba City adopt an ordinance to rescind ordinance 06-10, rescinding the city's Lincoln East specific plan. And then the process with that, with it being an ordinance, is it will go to the city council for 2 readings. And so it will come before them for the first reading. It will follow up with a second reading if it's approved, and then it comes into effect 30 days after that. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ben. Fellow commissioners, prior to questions and answers, or questions and comments among us, allow me to open the public hearing at this time. So Ashley, do we have any public comments online?
There are no public comments online.
Okay, thank you. And anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this matter, please approach the podium and state your name and address.
Hi, my name's Heather Essman, and I live on 2020 Lincoln Road. So if you look at that map, right smack dab in the middle is Lincoln, and you go right over to the very right-hand side. No, Lincoln, not there's Lincoln. So if you go 4 houses over, that's where I live. So this is definitely something that had, we purchased the home about 5 years ago or something like that, and we were told that this plan was a possibility. You know, they had been talking about it. So it does impact me if there's any development or anything there drastically, specifically because where I live, there is no sidewalk. So that would cause some conversations probably with the city, but we'll see what happens there. So I tried to discuss a couple of things with the city last night, one of which was to make sure that, because the Planning Commission makes recommendations to the City Council, that we focus in on how we make sure that we keep the 82 acres that's in this plan so that we have parks and recreational facilities, as he was discussing before, Mr. Moody?
Yep.
Okay.
Ben,
So
however you
now
want to do it.
what he was saying before, if somebody wanted to take one of those prime little yellow spots and develop something in there, the only thing you could basically do is give them some sort of a impact fee to help pay sometime in the future for a park, but it doesn't create a park. And the same instance where we have right now, fortunately we have a park that's in development, which is probably one of the triggers for people wanting to develop above by Harder Parkway, because there's going to be a park right there. That's great. So everybody next door is going to get a brand new park for themselves. So it does actually, it's a good idea to keep that on that plan, and remember to focus that if anything comes to you, that was basically promised with this plan years ago before you even were probably on this dais or whatever they call it. So I'm hoping that we can focus in on that, because this area, as I mentioned to the other ones, if you go all the way up, you'll see there's Regency Park. All the way down, you'll see there's Happy Park. And in between Happy and Regency Park, there's one park. That's it. Everything west of 99, that's all we've got. And I walk my dog regularly. I would appreciate having a park to be able to walk to. And I'm so far away from Happy Park, it would take me 2 hours to get there and back at one time around the park. So the one problem that I had, and I was trying to explain that yesterday and it wasn't coming through, was so this is not city property. This is within our sphere of influence. But there are people between 2010 and now that have developed in this area. There's a house on Lincoln that's very big. I don't know if you can see it. It's like this big bump on Lincoln right before you get to Olmeyer, or is Oleyer? Oleyer, right? I don't know how to say it, sorry. But so that's been put in within the last 5 years or so, I think. Huge house. So there will be development along these roads, most likely within those yellow areas. Some of them are already developed because that's why they're brown, because there's houses there right now. But generally speaking, the county is the one that's approving these things at the moment. And if we don't have a plan in place, but it's only zoned, how much control is the city going to have on what they're putting in those spots? Because now there's no longer a plan. Does that make sense? And I don't know, maybe he can, if you wanted to get into the details on that, once my minutes are done. I only have 3.
We don't keep minutes on the plan.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure. So do you understand what I'm saying? Because that's a huge house, and that really doesn't fit in with, I mean, it's going to make it difficult for somebody to develop beneath that area because somebody was allowed to, it's one of those big, huge monsters. Have you seen those? Like the one that's over at Butte House? Yeah. So I don't know. Did you want to, should I finish or do you want to respond to that?
At the chair's discretion.
Oh, yeah, please respond, Ben.
So yes, absolutely, there's a plan, absolutely. So it's in the county's jurisdiction. So if somebody comes in with a house, they could build a house on their property. What typically happens is, what does happen in the sphere of influence, they'll collect city impact fees in the sphere on behalf of the city. And then we transaction back and forth on that. And then if it's a development where it's a discretionary development where they're changing the land use, if they're doing a subdivision, they'll submit it to the city staff for review. And so then we'll provide review comments. And so that's in the attempt to try to keep big houses going up right in the middle of a future road. But a lot of that sometimes that can't be mitigated. If the city's not there, they own the property, they have a right to build a house. What it really does is it's part of a development problem is when you get to that point, when we grow to that point, we're either going to have to move the road or purchase it, or figure it out at that point. But we do try to minimize those conflicts by sharing, within that sphere. So that's why we set the sphere of influence to set that growth boundary. And then the county implements some of the city's design standards inside that sphere of influence.
And you're sure of that?
It depends.
I've seen how tall that fence is in front of the building, so that's why I'm asking.
Oh, well, they don't ask, that's code enforcement, and that's, they build in the county, they go to the county for jurisdiction. And so the county has rules just like we do on the height of the fences, but if they enforce those, that's another matter. If somebody builds a 10-foot.
Your enforcement seems to be working a little bit better, let's just say that. I have a personal problem actually with code enforcement and a property that's across the street from myself, so.
I'll take that as a compliment. We strive, but we have a lot of our own problems. But
so there's nothing in place, even with this plan, there's nothing in place then basically that helps us control what's going in there, because what could end up happening is the same thing that happened with the Keyhole District, is that now we've got all these people that are half-half, and they're using the same facilities that we have, but they're not on our water, they're not on our sewer. So people are drinking from sewer septics that are from the 60s, and they've got a well right next to it. And at some point, that's going to fail, because that's what happened with our house. When we bought it, fortunately, we had a really good real estate agent. So
there's municipal codes, there's county ordinances, and maybe it's not as thorough as desired, but there's definitely, if you're within 200 feet, there's certain standards for their septic tanks. If you're within 200 feet of a sewer system, you need to connect to the city's sewer. If there's discretionary projects such as subdivisions, general plan amendments or large use permits that are in that sphere, they route it to the city for review comments. They have their own ordinances that have design parameters that are within that city. But yes, when they're in the county, they are under county jurisdiction. And so these plans are for when they annex into the city and for how we control that growth when it comes into the city.
So the plan's not going to help anyways, because by the time somebody comes over with big pieces like this, a lot of the little pieces around the city streets that we already have might be built out, and there's nothing that we're going to be able to do about it.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's hard for them to build out if there's no water or sewer, and if they haven't been subdivided. And so the county, so you have a large house, so you work on going around it, or it's not part of that plan.
I don't know, but that's one thing that seems to be a problem with the city and the county, is working together to try and come up with a plan. It's taking too long. I've already went to one of the LAFCO meetings to see, and they're basically always pushing it off on other people. But
well, you still have property rights.
Somebody has to have a plan, and somebody has to say, well, if you're on the right-hand side there and you're close enough to the city, The county should just be saying, it's in a plan, you guys need to go to the city and get yourself incorporated, and then you go into the city, because we're not dealing with that area anymore. I don't know why that discussion isn't made, doesn't make any sense. Particularly on Sanborn, down south, because they have up above too, they both have water, both directions have water, but the Sanborn, the part between Lincoln and Bogue is the one that would probably be developed across the street, because that would be the easiest place to build, right? And there are some properties over there where they have smaller, like homes or mobile homes or things like that. There's a couple of them on that side where that's already portioned off, so to speak. So it wouldn't be too difficult for them to just turn that into a home, because they don't have to get around any of the like current agricultural stuff, if that makes sense. But
Each property is different.
Right.
Each property has their own rights depending on what they want to do. If they want city services, city water to develop at city densities, they will need to follow under our plan and then come through the processes.
if the county's not getting the money, I don't know why the county isn't trying to more actively participate and say, this is going to be city, it's within your city sphere of influence, and kind of pushing, not necessarily saying that you have to do it that way, but just saying at some point you're going to be city anyway, so why not go ahead and hook up now? Because it's zoned that way and it's planned that way. But once the plan's gone, I don't know if people are going to understand that there's no longer a plan. Does that make sense? I'm all for getting rid of the plan, because there's a lot of things that are old, and we should go ahead and do that. That's not the point. But the point is that if we don't have a plan in place, I don't know what that means for people that are trying to develop in that area. And you won't be here forever.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer. I don't have a good answer for you. I understand what you're saying, that you don't want to set in motion conflicts, but you got to balance that with property rights and the rights for them to vote to be in the city versus the county, and what the county has for their ordinances. I would be more than happy to support any sort of county effort to match city efforts, because then it just helps us easier. But I know they have to balance their own requirements. So.
Okay. Well, I basically was curious about that, because it didn't look like anybody was interested in developing at the moment. And for me, it's very important, because I don't know what's going to happen if somebody were to come in that in one of those yellow areas right along Lincoln and say, I want to develop this quadrant, for example.
Then they'll come talk to the city. They will submit a subdivision map. We're going to review it per our standards to make sure their water sewer per our water and sewer master plan requirements. And then we're going to set up our impact fees and meet all of our policies regarding road widths, and then look at this information that we have regarding triggers for traffic improvements, triggers for the parks, different things like that.
And does that include a sidewalk in front of my house?
That gets more complicated, and probably not, but that's but they will pay impact fees. I mean, that's a whole nother issue we could talk about, but that gets into county standards. You got built with county standards without sidewalks, and then you have a new development come in. The new developer pays for their requirements, which is typically their road frontage improvements, and they'll pay for their impact fees associated with wider impact fee roads, but that doesn't pay for necessarily sidewalks off-site in front of existing homes. And so that is definitely an issue that we deal with, and that's why we'd like to see people design now with city standards, and why we comment to county proposals on new developments that put sidewalks in.
Okay, so.
But you don't get the neighbor who develops to come pay for yours, unfortunately, is how our policy works.
No, but it could be that there's part of the plan where they try to make a push, because in front of my house is where the sewer stops, because they had to put in a sewer.
And so the sewer will have to come in and connect.
Well, yeah, they'll run a sewer through there, and if my neighbor's still alive next to us, they'll definitely hook up, because their septics are probably also compromised, considering they're the same age as mine was. But I'm just a bit nervous as far as whether or not that's going to be something I have to start saving up for or not, because I don't know how much the city would expect us to pitch in for that, because it is actually needed. There's a lot of older East Indian people that do their walks there, and I'm basically a bit worried at some point one of them's probably going to get, particularly on a Monday when the trash cans are out in front, that somebody's probably going to get hit at some point, and then we're going to have another conversation, but I'll keep my fingers crossed. So, but anyways, I appreciate that information. Thank you.
Heather, thank you for all of your comments and concerns, and we love public comment, period, so we can learn from you what the needs and gaps and strengths lie in our city. So thank you for being here. With that, I see no other public comments, so thereby I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to our commission. Commissioner Adams?
I did say yet. So just a couple of statements, really. I agree, this is outdated. The zoning stays the same, so I think that's helpful in one of your comments in regards to how the park allocation is set up in this, in the zoning. That remains the same unless there is a change, but that requires a zone change. So there'd be lots of public opportunity at that point if that were to occur. I do support planned development on the other hand of it. I think it's the smartest way to grow in a community. Coming in piecemeal in large sections of town can create, I think, more problems than not. So I struggle with that part of it because planned development is a powerful tool in a community to keep the standards where we need them, because our standards are somewhat lacking in certain areas that don't allow the commissioners to place certain requirements on developers for development. So I would just request that become a priority at the staffing level by opening this up. Although this is a ways out, we haven't even annexed in, we don't have any requests for annexations, but taking the time to get those guidelines where we need them, to have the standards so that we can take the actions necessary to ensure that the development meets the guidelines that we want to move the community forward with. Let's see. And I think that was all. Other than that, I support removing and the resolution to request the council to rescind the plan. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Dosher, any comments? Thank you. And Commissioner Dale out there in virtual world, do you have any comments or questions for staff?
I'm okay.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, and remind me again when the, that growth policy, it was just recently removed, right, by
So
council?
we just removed the growth policies, gosh, was it May 2021? You know, and I would, just to follow up on Commissioner Adams, absolutely, you know, that is why the city for the last 2 decades is called out master plan, specific plan areas. That's why the city invested over $1 million into this. And so it's not lightly that we remove it. And it's taken time to go down this path. It's just where it's at the point that it's more of a hindrance where you could have the best planned growth ever, but if it never happens, then it's not facilitating that. And so I think I agree, staff level, and I'll communicate that it's definitely finding that balance that we still want strong planned growth. And it's just tough in the city because of the parcel size would be my argument is we're not in Lincoln or some of these outer areas in Yuba County where you're able to pick up 80 acres or 200 acres at one time. They're doing 20 acres, they're doing 40 acres as a big project. And so it's, then it makes it really tough for that planned development because of the financing on how to finance it across. Because you could say build a park all you want, but if they don't have control of that land and the project's not big enough to absorb the park, all you really do is just say no building because you can't facilitate that park growth at the same time. So.
Thank you. There are no further questions or comments from commission. I'll look to entertain a motion for recommendation to council.
Move staff's recommendation, item number 6.
Thank you.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Dosher,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Chairwoman Blake.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, if we
Again,
could
Heather,
get,
thank you for your comments.
yeah.
Bring our other commissioners back before moving to the next agenda item, which is just a business item.
We did. In our head.
Excellent. All right, well, with that, let's move on to agenda item number 7, the alternative city council use permit and development plan review process. Ben, please.
Okay, so for those that were around a year ago, year plus, a year and a half ago or so, this was a little bit of it was a hot item, I would say. Because it really, what it's doing is it's putting in place a mechanism for the city council. If there's a certain type of project regarding a use permit, and then now I'm adding the development plan, if there's a certain level of significance, they could reach down and process it without the planning commission. And so the takeaway, I'll work through the thing here. So January 2020, we came before regarding the use permit to the planning commission, and then went to the city council, where the council adopted this ordinance to have an alternative review method for an use permit. Since then, we have not processed any via the alternative method. And what it does is when an application comes in for a use permit, I send an email off to the city council within a certain time period. It says, hey, we've received this use permit. And it gives them, and then they have so many days that they have the option to then agendize the meeting if they want to consider it directly or not. At this point in time, I haven't heard that they've ever been interested in a current one. But at that council meeting where it was adopted, it's the intent that's been echoed is that for significant projects, or if there's a means to have some sort of streamlining, they desire to have that. And so, but they don't want to change the standard process. And so with that, we set up this trial period for 365 days. It went into effect in March, or they approved it in March, went into effect about 30 days later. And then, we're already a year and a half later, to be honest. And so with this change, there's also input about a development plan. And so with the development plan, that has to do with our large projects. And so in the city's zoning code, in the administration section, we have a development plan process, and there's a table in there that basically says, based on the size of the project, it determines on how it gets handled. And so if it's a single parcel, small parcel that's a restaurant that comes in, it's handled over the counter. If the zoning matches and it complies with everything, it's an over the counter. They submit a building permit. We review it to make sure the setbacks and densities and the use are good, and then they run through the ministerial process where it's over the counter. If you get a little bigger, all of a sudden you're doing maybe a multi-unit, maybe a small shopping complex. And it's based on some square footage. I think it's 100, less than 100. It depends. There's differences on that use too, I should say. If it's a residential, if it's multifamily, I think if we're under like 25 units, it goes to the planning commission. If it's over 25 up to 100, it comes to the planning commission. If it's over 100, it goes to the city council. And then you have differences for the commercial based on if it's indoor space versus outdoor space, these 50,000, 35,000 square foot thresholds that when it goes from the over the counter to the planning commission, and then there's another threshold when it goes to the city council. And so what I'm requesting tonight is review of what's being proposed for the alternative use permit and development process with a recommendation to city council, where then it's going to be an ordinance change that basically memorializes this alternative method. And this alternative method, it's really to have that tool in the toolbox for the council that for some reason, if a Costco comes in and they think that there's some sort of significance that saves the community a lot of heartache, that they have that option to basically reach down and try to streamline it possibly. As many of you know, usually there's a lot of steps with development, with subdivision maps, rezoning, general plan amendments, that does not change. So if there's a project that has a subdivision map and a use permit or a development plan, it would still come to the planning commission to be reviewed. If it has a rezone or a general plan requirement, it would still come to the planning commission for the review under the processes. But with this, it would have that alternative action when I receive a use permit application or a development plan application. I would send a copy of that. When I route it to the city council, and then they have the discretion within a certain amount of time to have direct review. And so that's really what I have before you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or take feedback on it.
Thank you. We'll start with Commissioner Schaefer. You have any questions? Comments?
Yeah, I have a couple. So I'm curious, as you put up there and was in this narrative, this all started with the city council, I guess back in January 2020, putting some kind of thought together about initiating this type of plan. And I'm just wondering, what exactly happened that all of a sudden someday they woke up and said, hey, we should probably try to circumvent this process that the Planning Commission has for review of these types of conditional use permits and development plans. Was there a specific event that this was tied to? Because for how many decades has the Planning Commission had a participation in the role of reviewing this stuff? And then all of a sudden, the City Council, at their whim, decides that they would like to possibly circumvent. Was there a singular event that happened that caused them to think this way?
Yeah. I would think it had to do with the recycling industry project, Recology recycling industry project, and how that played out and the term that it played out. I don't think it was so much when the Planning Commission, it came through pretty smooth, but there was a lot of initial requirements, and behind the scenes, we know there were people gearing up for appeals and different legal paths that they were looking for options. And I think that's really with the new council that came on that heard that from the community, that was one of their goals as they came onto the city council, that they wanted to have an option in order to maybe have direct review to avoid some of those issues.
Okay. And then
I don't know if it will, because it depends on what the future big problem is, if it is or not, but this is, I believe, the attempt to try to streamline and avoid that.
Okay. So in our narrative here that we were reading, the provision B mentions about that within 7 calendar days, any member of the city council may direct the city manager to add an item to the agenda and the next reasonably available meeting for consideration to use the alternative city council. But it doesn't mention anything about what criteria are any of these council members planning to use to make the determination that, hey, this one here doesn't really need to be held by, doesn't need to be heard by the Planning Commission. We can just do it ourselves directly. What criteria are they going to be using to make those types of decisions? Because that's not included in here, which probably would be helpful to see as part of the overall narrative that you're drafting here.
So it'd be the same that's in the code as of now. I don't know if we put the findings in there. And so there's options that right now it gets appealed to the city council or it goes to the city council at a certain level. And so with an use permit, there are certain findings that need to be made that I believe there's 6 or 7 of them, that they have to be consistent with the community. It can't be negatively affect different elements. And so we usually work through those when you approve them, the A, B through Fs. And that would be the same criteria that they would have to find as the city council that it meets that.
But that's the criteria they'd be using to say, hey, this one we'll listen to, this one we won't.
I see.
That's the criteria.
No, and so the criteria is
something like this one you just talked
so
about.
it is solely on the discretion of the city council or member that decides to pull it up.
Right, and that's my point. There is nothing in here about what criteria they're going to use to,
and that's
or discretion
intentional.
they're going to use to make that decision. I'd certainly like to know that they're taking this one and putting it in the process because of this. Or we're not going to do this one because there should be narrative in here that delineates, for our benefit at least, what criteria they're going to use to say this one we're going to hear, this one we're not going to hear.
Intentionally, it's left written as it is to give them that flexibility.
Okay.
But I definitely can and see if I could talk with them or if we could work through that at the council meeting if there's any criteria that they want to establish. But as of now, I've not heard that they want it flexible, so it's at their discretion.
Yeah, then that flexibility brings ambiguity, and then you start to figure out why did they choose that one to look at? And why did you not choose this one to review? Because it's completely ambiguous at this point. So it'd be helpful, I think, if we're going to get on board with something like this, that they might show us some of the criteria they anticipate using for that decision making. And I had a question on provision D, where it talks about factors for proceeding with the alternative review process can include likelihood of an appeal to the city council if another review process is used. And I'm just curious, how many use permits or conditional use permits that we're talking about have come before the Planning Commission in the last 3 years, say, that ended up getting appealed to the city council?
So I would say I've only been here in the planning department role for 2 years.
Okay, well, let's go.
And we've had one appeal related to the subdivision.
Okay, and how many
For the use permits,
have been submitted for our approval? I mean, how many have we listened to that ended up got appealed?
I would say very few. Very few. Recycling industries,
If there's that few, then they
maybe
can't
one
really
more.
be using that criteria
Very
here
few.
as a reason by which we're doing this, because there's very few that ever get appealed to begin with. That's my whole point. That's why I was asking that question. Because
Yeah.
it sounds to me like if there's so
And
few
I think
to
the
begin with,
intent
why
is
are
for
they?
those very few that gives them the method to bring it up.
Okay. And I think there was one other question I had. Yeah, the same thing was for the development plans. How many development plans have come before us, that we approved or disapproved that got appealed? Would it be the same type of number? Very few?
I would say very few, especially with the economy. We haven't really looked at large-scale development plans in a decade. And so we're processing a few here. I can't remember yesterday, but with the development plan, maybe with the Waffle House, or we're looking one right now with Harder. They submitted a commercial that we'll bring before you, but very few.
But very few, yeah. So again, my thought would be what's the purpose of even having to do it this way if so few are getting appealed to begin with? And then, I went and I looked on the Yuba City website under the Planning Commission, and it mentions the commission is charged with making investigations and reports on the design and improvement of proposed divisions of land. And it sounds to me like, particularly the development plan one, that's going to be completely contrary to what we have on the website is what our role, to work for the city and the citizens of Yuba City are supposed to be doing. That's what the commission is supposed to be doing. And it sounds like they are basically taking that authority on selected ones that they decide is, for whatever reason, needs to be done that way. So I'm trying to figure out, you're basically right on our own website, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And they're deciding, and as far as I'm concerned, without much documentation, arbitrarily deciding not to let us hear some of the ones. Because I think at the end of the day, Ben, my concern is they're circumventing our long-standing participation in the review process. That's what they're asking to do. And they're arbitrarily asking to be able to do that. As you said, it was intentionally left that way, subjectively. And I get a concern if it's these issues now, what's it going to be a couple years from now or a year from now? Are they going to want to take something else away from our participation and role in things? And the other thing is that, we as a body, we develop an opinion when we hear one of these proposals, and then we as a body vote, and then that vote's on record. Okay, so that opinion of a second body for checks and balances is now on record about how we feel about that proposal. So if somebody ever wants to go back and look, they're going to say, well, the Planning Commission voted this way, and the council decided to overrule it, or whatever the case may be. But having that second opinion of a body of people, I think, is kind of important in the whole system of checks and balances. That's what I believe. And I think what they're asking to do without much documentation, without much, opinion or whatever you want to call it, they're just asking us to just say, okay, well, just go ahead, just do it. And I don't feel comfortable without more information about what their intent is here to be able to get on board with it. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Schaefer. Commissioner Adams.
I support this plan. I've supported it when it came out initially. I believe that as a commission, we are here as in a role on behalf of our council members, and we are here to serve at the will of our council members. We are a discretionary body. And I believe that the whole intent of this is to identify those controversial items in the forefront to avoid the additional process of having multiple meetings to have it end up in front of the council as the end result anyway, and to help those developers and those projects advance more quickly so that we aren't having to rehash the concerns and keep the community kind of in an upsetted situation before it gets approved or gets to council and the appeal process, et cetera. I believe that our leadership is going to do the right thing. We are here to implement the guidelines that are in hand, which are the same ones that they're going to be using. And although our opinion might be set aside for the moment for certain projects, I don't think that it's meant to be a sidestep of what our role is. I think that, they definitely respect what we do and they want us to do that, but they at the same time want to support things to happen more quickly and more efficiently when they know that there's going to be an item that's going to raise concerns and end up in front of them anyway. So I definitely support moving forward with this. The only comment I would say is that if they choose a project to look at, that they just let us know what that one is, because we are, here to represent them as well. So just that communication to let us know that they're going to be taking one onto their agenda and not ours, that gives us the opportunity to follow that project and provide input to them if we do have significant comments that we might want to make to the council members on behalf of our role as a planning commissioner. So that's all I have.
Commissioner, or Vice Chairman Tillman.
Okay. Yeah, I really soul searched this a long time. And one of the things that bothers me a little bit, I do spend a lot of time going over every single thing you give me. And I feel the same way. I feel like we are an advisory, we're a body, but that's what we're here for. And I don't see it as a whim of the council. I think we are a body of a planning commission that we're going to give our opinions, and it doesn't mean they're right or wrong. And yes, the council can say nope, we're going to throw that out. But I do like the opportunity of looking at the project. I'm sorry if it goes to appeal. You never want that. That's not what our motivation is either. We want growth. We want all this. I think we have I'm looking ahead. My new life is looking ahead 10 to 20 years. And if we make a decision now, we don't know what kind of council comes in and where the biases are. And I think right now you're right. I think we have a great council. I think they're trying to help us not to have to go through any controversy. And I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I take this role pretty serious, very serious. And I feel like I want to be part of the decision making. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Brookman.
I have nothing.
Okay, Commissioner Dosher.
And this is why we get paid the big bucks.
Indeed.
That's why the council gets the big bucks.
A couple of questions to the chair. First question I have, Ben, and excuse my back, I'm just trying to get on the tape. As a body, with the exception of one commissioner when this came through in January of 2020, we voted not to approve this. Of course, we've got a couple of new commissioners now. We voted not to approve this, and they got our recommendation not to approve this. I guess my first question is, why does it come back to us to recommend approval for this? If they want to do it, why didn't they just do it?
So per the zoning code, when we want to change an ordinance, it needs to come through the planning commission for a recommendation and then go to the city council. And so how we're set up is that if we're going to change an ordinance, it needs, in the zoning ordinance, it needs to come through the planning commission, and that will remain in effect.
Thank you. Second question I had was, and I'll piggyback on John's comment, the issue of fairness and the appearance of fairness. Everybody has that right to come in here and expect to be heard and to have us, have everybody that comes through here guaranteed fairness. And the bypassing kind of bothers me on that fairness issue. Some people are, I don't want to say more fair than others because it gets bypassed by the city council. I'd like everybody to understand when there's a process. And taking that process, everybody goes through that process. Nobody expedites the process. And then we talk about expediting the process. What really does it expedite? If they come in through here and they get heard by the planning commission and then it goes to the city council for adoption or whatever. And then this other mode that's in here now, it would go if one of the city council members asked to hear this, then it goes to a vote of the entire council to see if 3 out of the 5 want to do it. And then it gets calendared for another council meeting to hear the item. What's fast track there? 2 meetings or 2 meetings?
Yeah, I'm not arguing the point. There definitely could be, there might be some concurrency where as the staff is putting the project together, as we work through our review and our development, some of those meetings could be taking place prior. So maybe it would hold, it might short some time off, because a lot of times what happens is we receive the project, we're not ready to bring it to staff for consideration for a couple months. And so some of those meetings could take place in that duration. But you're correct, there are multiple meetings at the council level in order to consider it, have the full body approve it, and then bring it back when it's ready.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate your answers. I do. One of the commissioners indicated, and this is just a personal feeling, I'm appointed to this commission from the county. But I can give you an example of how I am on the county. When I was appointed by one of the Board of Supervisors members, I said, never interfere with me on what I'm doing. Fire me if you want to fire me, but never interfere with me because I'm an independent voice. That's what you want, that's what you get. So I don't feel like I work at the pleasure of anybody, that I have to do what they ask. I do what I feel is principled and right, but not just because they want it done. And I go back to the issue of fairness, that's all. I have nothing further.
Thank you. And Commissioner Dale, do you have any comments or questions concerning this agenda item?
I'm just, kind of on the same page with everybody. I believe we're an important third party to look at, these plans for the city. I don't think this commission is going to, kill any plans or any growth. I think, we have a pretty good commission over here. And at the very least, like it was mentioned earlier, if there was some criteria or guidelines to, which plans would, be included in this, which wouldn't, that would, making it a lot less vague. At the least, I would recommend that. But that'd be all.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I too agree that there is a process for a reason, and especially if there is a controversial subject at hand, perhaps this body that is appointed by our fellow council could assist in some clarification and easement in some capacity. So, and lastly, I've always believed in being fair and consistent with each and every project, and seeing that each council member can pull at their discretion is of concern. So with that, any additional questions or concerns? All right. So do I have a motion on the floor?
I'll make that motion to approve and move forward.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Dosher,
No.
Commissioner Dale,
No.
Commissioner Brookman,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer,
No.
Vice Chairwoman Silman,
No.
Chairwoman Blake.
No.
Well, thank you, everybody. I definitely respect each of your opinions, very much so.
Yeah, and we respect you too, Ben.
No
And the
salt
council,
in old
respect the
wounds.
council as well.
But
All right. Thank you. So let's look at future agenda items. I'm going to ask Ben to provide an update on what's going on in our beautiful town of Yuba City.
there is a lot
Oh,
going
my.
on. We are busy. We've been busy.
How Hobby Lobby, what's the date?
Getting closer, I guess. So I guess we'll talk about some of the fun stuff. Did I tell you Five Below in the Burlington?
What? Wait, Five Below?
So there's a store called Five Below. It's kind of, I think there's one in Chico, but it's called Ross. It's kind of like a Ross for younger kids.
I thought it was like a bar.
Okay.
Oh, yeah?
So on the side of the mall, the Smart and Final development that didn't come through, they're going to split it up, and then one side's going to be a Five Below, and the other side's a Burlington Coat Factory. So yeah, that's some news. Starbucks is opening on the end of the month. I think the 30th or the 1st. Yeah.
Yeah, north side, please. Oh, did they?
Yeah, I think they've been looking. I definitely hear, over towards Franklin or down towards Walton and Lincoln, type of, but we'll see on that one. Burger King, they started down in Tower Mart area, so they're under construction. One that we're kind of excited about is Franklin Road Apartments, and so we just received the apartment complex at the dead end of Franklin and is it Gray? So we're Gray tees into Franklin. There's that kind of big empty lot that's been kind of a mess for years, and so we received 20 unit complex. So it's actually a little bit high density for our area. So I'm kind of excited about that. Hopefully they're affordable. They come in.
Any news on our other Franklin project? Across from Winco?
Yes. So
Really?
so they have approved plans.
It was dead.
They've paid their bill. That was pretty substantial, like 150 grand, or 20 grand for that first phase. And they've submitted 3 model homes. And so there's I think it's 1290, one that's 1,400 square feet, and then one just under 1,600 square feet. And so there are 3 models, real similar, kind of a townhouse style, 2-story. Not much yard, but the street's a little bigger, so they're not going to look. I'm hoping they're a little better than the Franklin, those ones just west on Franklin. Yeah. And so some progress. I think with payment of the bill and having the improvement plans done and getting the engineers on, I think that was a big step forward. What do we got? The Home 2 Hotel. Did I talk to anybody about that one? So they've submitted, so on the north side of Target, they're on the east onside frontage road. They've sent some preliminary plans into us, and we've commented on those. That would be a development plan that would come forward for council review, and maybe a parcel map, depending on how they split the property for planning commission. And so then you have, I'm hoping they don't go away, but they seemed real interested, and we saw some preliminary elevations. So we're looking forward to see if that application comes back in.
Did you say single family or multi?
Multifamily for the apartments.
No, for that, hotel.
Hotel.
Another hotel?
So hotel, homes, it's by Hilton?
I heard homes.
By Hilton, homes.
Extended stay.
Yeah, and they starting to pop up around. They have in Roseville and a couple in Sacramento area.
And are we talking about like right by, between Target?
Just north of Target.
First steps
Uh-huh.
over in that
Yeah, okay.
Yep, so if you took the east onside frontage road, it'd be right adjacent to the Target parking lot.
Close to 99.
Exactly.
Okay.
What do we got? One that's we're seeing progress on is Harder. We've got through all of the humps with Harder, and so we've had a national builder, D.R. Horton, really interested in giving the go-ahead for improvement plan design for those houses on the west side of Harder. And then also we've received a commercial development plan, basically a pre-application, but it's pretty in-depth. I don't know how exciting it is, but it's a couple quick service restaurants and a car wash and a gas station. But it shows that development on the west side there with the houses in the back. And so that's what we've received recently that we're kind of getting some preliminary comments on. I think everybody says if they're a Chick-fil-A, maybe we'll talk, but we'll see on how it lays out.
Commercial more towards 20 rather than your house, is that?
So there's this commercial, yeah, is that, yep,
Okay, like 20 and harder.
20 Harder, yep. What else did we see? The Waffle Barn submitted, a gas station car wash with a quick service, with another type of restaurant to go through there. So we'll see. I mean, I'm trying to think of what else has been exciting lately. A lot of, I think what's coming before you at the next meeting is we have River's Edge. That's that Lincoln Road apartment complex. Been kind of a long-standing project that was approved back in 2015, 2016. And so they're requesting, I think I've talked, to bump up the units from 172 to 196 and then enter into a development agreement. And so that's going to be before you, hopefully at your October 27th meeting. We're pushing hard for this Henson map. There's the subdivision map between Hooper and El Margarita that we're trying to bring forward and get approved. And then we have a small use permit just for kind of a dual purpose office commercial on Bridge Street. And then the other big item that came in, there's been some talk about it, but it's in that Lincoln East specific plan, is called the Buck Ranch. And so there's an annexation proposed that went to LAFCO, if you want to pop it open. And so is we've talked a little bit about, but here is an annexation that is actually submitted and pending with LAFCO. And so this creates some work in my world. Because what that does is the first thing we say is like, well, I don't like it that way. Let's try to square it up. We want to own all of Bogue Roads. We maintain it, so we're not doing this hodgepodge. Same thing with, is there a way to block this off and kind of bring this over, without causing a big revolt about people not wanting to come into the city? This wouldn't, again, this doesn't cause development, but then it now comes into the city's jurisdiction, which then when it pre-plans it for development, so then when they do submit their development plans, it comes to the city versus the county. And so this is, this area over here has been pending. That was one of the small subdivisions for a while, and that's one of the ones I talked about that it's Bogue and Sanborn that you could approve it to say in accordance with the plan, but it's not feasible to do it. And so this area has been talking about a while that you'll see a subdivision map come forward at some point with this annexation as a requirement. The annexation might happen first and then it comes, or if we process it and then it's contingent on the annexation. But you'll see some, you'll get to look at this here probably within the next couple months or sooner, depending on how we get it through. Gosh, that's a lot of stuff. Any questions for me going on?
No, but that's how giddy you get. You were like, I'm really excited.
We got new axe throwing places. What do we got? We got,
Yeah, I heard about that.
every single type of use you could think of, good and bad, with,
So Ben, you literally just get a phone call in the planning department to say, I'm looking, is that how that kind of works with you, or do you have it?
we get both. I mean, I get, a big engineering firm, MHM in town, say, hey, Ben, I'm working on this. What do you guys think about this? We're working on some stuff. Some of the other engineers will call me. Let's work through the steps. Let's have a pre-meeting to talk about it. And others, I get, the random calls that says, hey, I'm so-and-so, connect the dots. I'm looking for property for Amazon. Where's my spots? And then we kind of talk and then work through a couple of those different locations to see. And then some are real, some aren't real. But I'm hoping the 1 out of 20 is, but definitely every which way.
We're doing good.
Yeah.
Just point out that Kentucky Fried Chicken's drive-through worked.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
They're
my
doing
gosh,
great.
That is amazing, and they're never backed up.
It's Derek's favorite restaurant. I'm like,
Did you just
enough KFC.
Hopefully it's slowed
Hollywood
down.
Outdoor.
We have some comments. We have some comments that we got to work through with. The garbage cans are supposed to be behind there. We've got some management issues. We're working. It's all good, but they have some growing pains when you first open and they go boom. But it'll mellow out. And
It's still not as frightening as Antonio.
yeah, at least it's not on.
Still frightening.
It's not on Highway 20. It's not on Bridge Street. It's going back. The overflow.
Yeah, they do. It's just not the greatest location. I mean, it just grew so fast. It
Yeah.
really is, yeah.
And when's the planning commission, city council workshop for that cannabis thing?
Okay, so that's a big one. Cannabis it was originally going to be a workshop, kind of a separate independent workshop. It got postponed. It was going to be 9/21 due to some conflicts. Now it's set for the 10/5 meeting. And so it's a workshop presentation at the council meeting, which I anticipate will be a long meeting. I've received a lot of input both ways. Marijuana today, heroin tomorrow has been my favorite line so far. But definitely pros and cons, and people put it out, and really the intent, my understanding from the mayor is really to kind of have the cultivation people talk, the dispensary people talk, go over some of the myths and facts, some of the changes that have happened since the laws changed since 2016, 2017 when it's come into place. And it's really kind of to have maybe a nod as to what direction, because we have applicants that are wanting to come in. So it's really, is it a no, is it a go, or is there a certain level and how to proceed? And so looking for direction on some of that myths, listen to people talk, and then trying to figure out next steps.
Any other questions?
I just have a question, because I'm sorry. Were you going, John? No. So I'm just trying to get my head around and understanding to learn. So on Plymouth Street, and we have the new smoke shop. And
Jackie, I know.
not to talk about it?
No,
Oh,
please.
But I mean, that didn't have to come through because that's just a business decision. Am I right?
Wait.
Whoever owns the building?
May I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Do we have the authority, and nor do I know if anyone here wants to do that, to place moratoriums in, put one in place for no more additional? Because they look
Or no neon lights at night, or, CBD.
Those are
works
where,
so
those are
hard.
where I need to do code enforcement, if there is,
Yes.
if there is a
Our
code enforcement, because they
beautification efforts
they
have-
load their signs up, they put that neon, it's
That's
not legal
awful.
right now, and I need to get somebody out there just to,
No, but moratorium for real.
so for real,
I'd rather have a cannabis shop at this point.
They look much prettier.
for real you can.
Yeah, that will be future, yeah.
My recommendation, and being real for a minute, is as I work through kind of a draft cannabis ordinance, is that there's a lot of thresholds or a lot of consideration and decision points, and hey, how many do you want in a community? People have done it by restricting you to a certain amount and then having like a request for proposal process to limit it, or they've done it through the zoning where it says, hey, you can only have one every 1,500 feet or something like that. And I am suggesting, I think we tweak some of the proposed language if it goes that way, is that we address the smoke shops, because a lot of them have that CBD oil.
Yeah.
And it's this vague, is it cannabis, is it not, under our, depending if it's this hemp oil, from the cannabis plant, but they're really pushing the threshold of what's legal under our code, and then it's the code enforcement violation, and really the signs are off the hook. So I will agree with you. And so I will take I take that as a YC3 one ticket I'm hearing for
Yes.
to do something.
Michelle first.
I haven't seen the one on,
second.
honestly, Plymouth Street, I've
We
seen
did
the one on
twice.
20. I don't know if I've seen the one on Plymouth Street.
Yes, Ben, it was horrible. I was driving down, I was like, oh,
It's the old Pelton's building.
yes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, and at nighttime, I walked out of Happy Viking, and I was like, what, is there police down there? And it says, open, CBD,
Wow.
CBD, and I was like, are you kidding? Is that
That's
on?
not why we invested.
So I thought maybe, I didn't know if it had to come through your department. or
Right
is that
now,
just-
it's a business, it's in a commercial district. They check for the zoning that they're selling products, and right now, it's just a business license going into that approved use. But there is ways to modify it, and maybe that's an option, depending on how the cultivation, or if something goes, that we address that at this time, if there is
Yeah.
the need. It does get tricky limiting, but I would say you have to do it through the zoning and say how many, a distance apart from
But I
each
do
other.
have a question though, because isn't tobacco, per the law, completely separate from the cannabis issue? So
Tobacco
how do
is.
we combine those two without muddying it up?
I would say probably the CBD, if is where I was thinking about it. If you're getting,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's
Walgreens
that's where
sells
you get
it in
tricky.
yeah.
Tennessee.
It might be more the signage if it's
think it's
worried.
more the signage.
And maybe it's worried about the signage.
Yeah.
That, and we don't need any more?
Took a donut shop for one cigarette shop, now they take it, no, okay.
Arcata has a really good ordinance. I don't know. I know that there's so
Arcata?
much information out there, but Arcata has done a pretty good job at trying to mitigate their their locations, so just.
I'll look that up. On the smoke shops?
Because they're
or on
not
the cannabis?
really tobacco shops.
Yeah, Sandy Drown had suggested for me to tell you that Reno has a ordinance for, this is for the cannabis, that they have an ordinance and tells you how many feet and all that, so you might want to check with Reno.
Yeah, the world is definitely cannabis. I mean,
It is.
Chico, Gridley
All
has it now,
revenue.
Marysville, Tecolosa,
Yeah.
you go to the south. It is here, and what you'll hear at this, meeting, good or bad, is that really 80% of the business that's going to Tecolosa is from Yuba City.
Yeah,
60% of the traffic that's going into the Marysville store is Yuba City.
all revenue.
And so you'll hear some of that stuff.
I have a lot of people come to me with like security issues, and we provide security in one of the two in Marysville, and 2.5 years we've had law enforcement respond twice.
And see, that's kind of
It's highly regulated.
that's some of the myth stuff.
Water more often than
Really, it's about the nuisance of the smell. That's really a huge part of it. It's
For the grow.
For the, yeah, for the neighborhoods, and, I live next door to somebody who had 5 plants outside. I think I called your code enforcement officer every week. It stunk so bad.
Yeah.
Our whole neighborhood. Before they finally got it taken care of. They let him harvest it before they made it. He never brought it back. So.
Not this year. Let me know early.
It's a close.
But that's,
I was
mean,
just
that's
gonna
the nuisance
give him a
is-
compliment.
as far as the neighborhoods go.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, Ben, it is a joy to work with you, you and your staff. I have learned so much. It's nice that we can text and call, and I appreciate your really getting down to the information on how we felt on that situation, and we appreciate you taking that back and
Yeah, absolutely.
making it a nice soft blow.
Thanks, Vin.
Thanks.
So before we close out, Commissioner Dosher, do you have anything to report on behalf of Sutter County
No,
Planning?
we haven't had a meeting since the last time this body met.
Okay. Anything else before I adjourn?
One thing before you adjourn is that I'm trying to put together a training. And so maybe a thought came through regarding a possible bringing in an attorney and maybe a land use specialist from the private side and to kind of walk through some of the entitlement processes. I know we have some new commissioners and just an opportunity to ask a land use attorney any questions, both sides, to kind of walk through some of the environmental stuff, walk through the application processes and different things. And so I'm not looking to make it too long, I mean, that's a lot to take in. So we're trying to figure out a balance, but you might see that on your schedule in the next few months. I'll talk about maybe a couple hours at training and ask maybe for input on when you guys think is a good time to have it. If it's maybe before the meeting, we do an hour or some sort of hour and a half type of thing that's not too long. So that'll be coming forward. And if there's any other training ideas, please let me know.
Well, remember, we did talk about, Ashley especially, we talked about perhaps doing some visits to local cannabis facilities.
Oh, I would love, I mean, we've just done two.
I don't know
To be
if
honest,
Sure, but nonetheless,
if there is a little interest in that, I could help coordinate that because it was I could tell you the staff level, I went to the Perfect Union operation in Sacramento where they had the dispensary and the cultivation. And then we went to one in Hollister where it was cultivation. They had a dispensary and it is eye-opening on the technology and some of the stuff that's going on the regulation that you see. And it helped us kind of look at zoning, what's right, what's the location, if the council decides to go down that path. And so, but if there is some interest, I'll set something up.
Well, I'll tell you, after working for 20 years in that compost area at Recology, the smell when it's wet, it can't be that much worse. I'd rather have the revenue. It was like, oh, I know what you're saying when it's raining. Yeah, I mean, but it's highly regulated. Again, you have so many rules you have to follow, so.
Well, people are starting to see everybody's driven past the Perfect Union in Marysville now, and they see it behind there, and
I've done it.
you don't know what it's there, except people lined up out the door. And like you said, you have a security guard, they give their license, everything's kind of a controlled environment. But there's a lot of decision points, and there's a lot of moral stuff that has, that it depends on how people want to look at it, and I mean, I could tell you, I've got plenty of emails on both sides, from marijuana today to heroin tomorrow. So,
Gosh, that is all, yeah. Gateway, all right.
All right, when is our next meeting, please?
so I'm planning for 10/27.
10/27.
And 27, we'll send out a cancellation for the 10, that first meeting in October, but, we're shooting for a full agenda on the 27th.
All right.
Perfect.
Well, with that, we'll call the meeting to close. Thank you.
Thank you.
On there.